Appreciate everybody for joining us. My name is Eric Hayden. I am a meteorologist with the National Weather Service in Morehead City. Jen Sawyer from Carteret County. I keep saying the community college because we're right here near the campus. But Jen is in the back from Carteret Emergency Services. She is handing out information. Also Carl Barnes, he's with the National Weather Service in Morehead City. He's currently doing an interview right now. But if you see any of us, do not hesitate to ask us any questions that you might have. This is the first time we have ever done a community forum. One of the main reasons for doing this is to talk more about hurricane preparedness. And we heard a lot of things from people during Florence. Well, I didn't leave because it went down to a Category 1 storm. Or in the past, I'm only going to leave if it's a 2 or 3 or 4. And we want to get that education more out to the public. We give talks to public officials like Jen all the time, but I thought we could do a better job of educating the community about different things you should be really prepared for during the hurricane season. So that's the reason for this talk. It's about 30 minutes, then it's your turn. That's the thing that is different from a lot of our talks where we allow time for questions, but it's 5-10 minutes tops. Any questions you have, please ask us. Again, Carl, one of my coworkers from the Weather Service, will join me, and we'll stay here as long as is needed to answer those questions. So sit back, enjoy the presentation, and then again, anything you think of, please ask us during the question and answer session. And for those joining us on Facebook Live, chime in with your questions and we'll get to those as well. So I really appreciate everybody joining us, especially given such a nice evening. I know you all could be doing a lot of other things than talking about hurricanes in the middle part of May. So a little bit about the National Weather Service. We always like to talk about the Weather Service in terms of what we do and who we are, because some folks might not be familiar with us. I'm used to moving around, and I realized that once that was anchored, so now I feel a lot better. So the National Weather Service, we fall under the Department of Commerce and NOAA. That's where you may hear about us a lot. So we are a federally funded agency. We're about $7 a year to fund us, and our main job is the protection of life and property. So we're the folks that issue the watches, warnings, and advisories. A lot of media is here today. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We would not have this many people in the seats unless you covered it, so thank you very much. We rely on those folks to get the word out, so that's where the partnership is. As far as the Weather Service is concerned, again, our main mission is protection of life and property. We'll tell you it's going to be a gorgeous week. We do a 7-day forecast just like the local media. The difference is we issue hurricane watches, tornado warnings, winter storm watches, things like that. And then we rely on our broadcast partners to help get that information out. This is a map of all the offices in the country. All the dots represent a local office, so we're all over the nation. We have over 100 local offices. One reason for that, I can forecast for the Crystal Coast from Alaska. We have that technology for sure, but I have a much better idea of the boating forecast when I'm getting calls day in and day out. What's the period? What's the wave height? What's the wind direction? When I send my family to Maryland and Florence, I can feel the emotion in a storm. When I see my neighbors still doing repairs, I can feel that emotion of a storm. So that's why we have local offices, that we're not up in DC, we're not out in California. I live over in Cape Carteret. Carl lives in Newport. We live in this area that we forecast for. Speaking of the local area, the yellow area is where we forecast, roughly the eastern quarter of North Carolina. For those folks up in northeast North Carolina, you're not left out. The Wakefield or Richmond office covers that area. Central North Carolina is covered by Raleigh, and then southeast North Carolina is covered by Wilmington. You'll notice this area does extend out into the ocean. If you've been on a boat, you've done any type of fishing, we do forecasts for the waters, wave height, period, wind speed. For that yellow area. So the Bogue Sound, Pamlico, Albemarle Sound, we go out 20 nautical miles. And then beyond 20 to 60 miles, that blue area, we do warnings for those areas. And then the Ocean Prediction Center covers the forecast. The big thing with meteorology and the Weather Service, we are open 24/7. Weather doesn't happen Monday to Friday, an hour for lunch, and you only work 9 to 3. Happens on Christmas, Thanksgiving, and weekends. So like a lot of first responders, we are staffed for emergencies. We are staffed for emergencies in terms of weather. It could be in the middle of the night, something pops up, we are always there. Our staffing, I forgot to mention, is about 22 of us. This is our some pictures of our office. If you see this is the Doppler Radar, and this is a building we launched an upper air balloon out of. We get a lot of tours in the spring. You're welcome to come take a tour of the facility. That's your facility. You pay taxes on April 15th. You pay for us. You're welcome to come on out and take a tour. We have information back at the booth for that. One of the coolest things about our office, among others, is we do that weather balloon launch at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. in the evening. So it's pretty neat to see. 24/7 no matter what. So we stay. So in Florence, we were there. We have very nice hurricane shutters. We're a brick building. We're one of the higher points in the county, so we are safe. We have a continuous supply of natural gas for our generator, so we're good to go. I was very fortunate. A lot of us had to sleep in the conference room, 3, 4, 5 people deep. I had an office, so I had a door, so I was lucky in that respect. This is all but about 2 of our staff. At this point, a few people could make it home. This is during Florence itself. So we were there from the meteorologist doing the forecast to the people that fix the equipment to make sure things are up and running. That is our staff itself. I say no matter what. We did sneak out of the office that Friday around midday to see what was going on. This is Highway 70 between where we are now and our office, covered with water. And then down toward where I live, Bogue, this is Highway 24, just past Carolina Home and Garden. You may have seen a picture of an alligator the other day, right about that area, where we had 2 to 3 feet of storm surge from Bogue Sound on Highway 24. So just emphasizing we are there no matter what. We staff up for emergencies. We have a storm shelter that we can go into the inside of the building if we have even stronger winds from, say, a tornado. I should mention on that other map, we showed you our sister offices up in Richmond or Wakefield and down in Wilmington. They will back us up if there's an emergency. So we have backup plans as well. Once Florence was done, the luggage started to pile up in the office because we had some families of our co-workers that had to come in, and we continue to do briefings. Folks like Jen with Carteret County, just because the storm has passed, now folks are coming back. There's still a lot of things to talk about in terms of weather. So this is how it looked in our office. This is a gauge showing some of the river flooding we had inland. So that's a little bit about us. Again, 24/7. We're the government agency that does watches, warnings, and advisories. And again, the big thing is that is our main mission, protection of life and property for that. If you didn't get a chance, at the back booth, we have a cool looking raindrop magnet, and that has all of our information. Again, you have already paid for it, so please use it. It has our mobile website. It has our website that you would use on a personal computer a little bit more, and you have a lot of information there. Aviation forecast, marine forecast, any type of forecast specialized that you need is on that website. This is how it looks if you go to the website. Weather.gov/MHX. Again, you're welcome to write it down, but just take one of those magnets home and that will get you going. Pretty neat way to get the forecast. You can enter the city or zip code in the upper left or just click anywhere on the map. And we kind of break it down in a couple different ways. If you just want to know when can I cut the grass, when is it going to rain next, that's what's up front and center. High and low, chance of rain, is it going to be sunny, is it going to be cloudy? If you scroll down the page, a little bit more detailed, what's the wind speed, what's the direction. Then farther down the page on the hourly weather graph, that is very detailed information. So I like to tell folks, go to the website, find your house, bookmark it. There's a ton of information on the website, but you need to play around with it a little bit to see what you're really looking for. Weather briefings, we put this on our website. So similar information that we send to Jen and other folks at the public official level is on our website. Big winter storm, severe weather outbreak, Florence. If you go to our website, you're going to get a little bit more information. Here's the top of the page. If you scroll down to the bottom, there's a lot of different icons, and I want you to click on the one that says Weather Hazard Briefing. If you go today, it's going to be blank. Luckily, most of this week's weather is going to be just what's happening outside now. If you go to the page 2 years ago when we had the big snow and cold, to a couple Friday nights ago when we had a tornado watch, that's the time to go to that page to check out the information. If you were to go to that page during the winter storm 2 years ago, this is what you would have gotten. We had 2 of them. How much snow, our confidence, just a little bit more information more than just the forecast itself. Why are we thinking this? What are the impacts to you where you live? And this is an example from Florence. We try to highlight the impacts. We're going to talk about that in a second, that we're not very concerned with the category of the storm. Am I glad it wasn't a 4? Of course. But regardless of the category, there's a lot of impacts that we are still anticipating with the storm, and putting the plus sign there for rainfall as an example of that. Our website is great. What I like about social media is we can grab what is most important coming up and tell you about it. So hey, waving our hands, jumping up and down, this is what you need to pay attention to. I know it's beautiful outside right now, but this week is Hurricane Awareness Week. You need to pay attention because hurricane season is coming up, that type of thing. During Florence, this is what we were talking about. One of the big posts we did was, as Florence approached, the category of the storm diminished. And again, I'm 3 miles from the beach. I was thankful it wasn't a category 4. However, the impacts were not going to change with respect to storm surge or rainfall and flooding. So that's what we tried to get out with our messaging. Don't let your guard down. Impact or categories just related to wind, that type of thing. So that's an example where we use social media to really highlight the message that we want to talk about. Another way we use social media is YouTube. We do webinars with county officials sometimes multiple times a day, and we record those and put them on YouTube. So not so much the Q&A part at the end, but exactly what we're briefing them on. And I know Carteret County has posted this, Pine Knoll Shores has posted this. So again, it's 5 or 10 minutes. You've got to give it some time, but if you want a lot of great information, head over to our YouTube page, and all of that is on our magnet. If you just remember NWS for National Weather Service, Morehead City, and you can find it on any type of social media platform, from YouTube to Facebook to Twitter. All right, so that laid the foundation, who we are, where you can find our information, whether it be on social media or our website. The main focus of this forum is hurricane awareness. Hurricane Awareness Week started yesterday. You might say, well, Eric, hurricane season doesn't start until June 1st. That is true, but I'm going to show you a graphic that some years, usually weaker, but some years we can get storms as early as May. I just moved down I grew up in Maryland. I love the snow, so I lived in upstate New York, and I just moved down here just over 2 years ago. And one of the biggest questions I got was, what's the hurricane season like? How many storms are we going to get? Is it going to be a bad year, or is it going to be not so bad year? And the biggest thing we stress with that is that hurricane forecast is great. The folks down at the Hurricane Center do a phenomenal job. I think it's around 70% of the time they are correct. However, it only takes one storm. Let's just say this year we're going to have an El Nino year, which it looks like is going to happen, and they're predicting a weaker than normal year. We could get to November and they are correct. We only have a couple storms. But if we get another Florence, what good does that forecast do? None. So it's interesting to look at, but we want to stress that it only takes one storm to make an impact on your life. So when you hear the hurricane forecast comes out in late May, read it, look at it, but remember it's just one storm that could make an impact on our life. Now, as far as climatology goes, I love this graphic because it shows that we really should pay attention right through the summer into the fall and not let our guard down. And this is what I mean. On the top, we've got the months starting from mid-May into December. This graph is showing hurricanes and tropical storms in red, and then just hurricanes in this light orange or yellow shading. And this is showing that the peak of hurricane season is usually about the middle part of September, right around when Florence hit. So I remember this vividly. Last August, I was doing a talk and somebody came up and said, oh man, we're through hurricane season. We're good to go. No. The ocean water supports storms. We need warm water, and it has a high heat capacity. I usually use a joke, I'm not going to jump in the ocean anytime soon, but water's actually warming up pretty good. It's upper 60s, but it takes a long time to warm up, but it also takes a long time to cool down. So the peak of water temperatures is usually early to middle September. So that's when the peak of hurricane season is. So do not let your guard down. Kids go back to school. Wow, we made it through another year. We're good to go. Not quite. Because here in eastern North Carolina, we are equal opportunity. Even as early as May into early June, we can have tropical cyclones. Chances are they probably won't be a really, really strong storm because the water is not quite warm enough yet. And then we've had storms like Matthew and Sandy into the fall months. So again, just emphasizing that hurricane season is long, that if we get into late summer and we haven't had anything, do not let your guard down. That's one big message. So first big message, seasonal forecasts are fun to look at. It only takes one storm, and that's why we need to prepare each and every year. Message number 2, peak of the hurricane season, middle part of September. So we need to keep our guard up from now right into the fall months. And again, we've unfortunately had a lot of experience in our area. The next couple slides, I'm going to talk about some products that we have along with the Hurricane Center, what they mean and what they don't mean. And a lot of you are going to be familiar with these, but you might be surprised at what some of them mean that you were not aware of. The first one is the Tropical Outlook. Any of this information you can find in the Hurricane Center website. Easiest way to remember it, hurricanes with S, plural.gov. So hurricanes.gov. We had a tropical weather outlook last week. We had a little disturbance off the coast of Florida. This is a 5-day outlook that says, hey, these are the spots in the ocean we're watching and the chance of development over the next 5 days. So this is an early heads up that, hey, we're kind of watching this. So that's what the tropical weather outlook is. Show of hands, how many have seen any type of forecast cone map? Yes. Maybe not in this exact form, but you've seen it on the local TV stations. You've seen it on our website. You've seen it somewhere. So we want to talk about what this means and what it doesn't mean. What this forecast cone means is the most probable path for just the center of the storm. It doesn't mean if you're in or out of that cone that you're out of the woods. It only means the center of the storm. And notice I said the most probable path. The center passes in this cone about 2/3 of the time. So what the Hurricane Center does, and this is probably the only science I'm going to throw at you, but those guys and gals down there are phenomenal at their forecasting. At the end of the year, they look at statistics and how the track accuracy has been, and they predetermine how big that cone is going to be at 24 hours, 48 hours, 72 hours. So that cone is showing what their statistical average error is. So 1/3 of the time, it's going to be wrong. So the center is not going to go on that path. 2/3 of the time, it's going to be right. So if you've noticed through the years that cone has actually shrunk because the accuracy has been more, has improved. So that's just the center of the storm. So the other point on this is impacts occur well away from the center. And I'm going to show you an example with Florence. So when you see this, it just says this is the most probable area for the center. But just because you live here or just because you live there and you're not in the path does not mean you're out of the woods, because a hurricane is not a point. Florence didn't hit Wrightsville Beach and only impact Wrightsville Beach, right? We had impacts up here in New Bern, and we were not by the center. We were close, but we were not the center of the storm. So impacts occur well away from that. Here's the example with Florence. Here's the most probable path. I think they were 2 miles off at day 5. Very, very accurate. But again, just on the edge of this cone is New Bern, and tell those folks that had 8, 9, 10 feet of storm surge that they weren't impacted. So the big takeaway from this, it's a great product to pay attention to. It shows the most probable path for just the center, but impacts can occur well away from it. So just because you're near it or out of it doesn't mean you're out of the woods. Until it's down, not to wish things on Texas or another state, but until it's way, way away from here, you need to pay attention to it. One last product I want to talk about, something newer that has happened the last couple of years. It's called the earliest reasonable arrival of tropical storm force winds. Sounds really fancy. All it means is this is in a worst case scenario, a 10% chance 39-mile-per-hour winds will get here. This is when you should have your preparations done. If you have them done at this point, you don't have to worry about anything. So this is our earliest reasonable worst case scenario that the winds pick up. Talking about leaving or preparing your property or whatever you need to do. And that's the graphic we use for that, the earliest reasonable time for tropical storm force winds. All right, the real crux of this presentation is going to get you away from focusing on the category of the storm and talking about all of the impacts we can have with that. So we talk about wind a lot, but we really need to start focusing on some of these other things like storm surge, rainfall, tornadoes, and yes, even rip currents. We'll talk about that. Here's a good old SaffirSimpson scale, probably familiar with this. 1 to 5, 5 being worse than a 1. But the only thing that goes into the scale is wind speed. It says nothing about rainfall, nothing about storm surge. It says nothing about a tropical storm. For example, let's say we just had 20 inches of rain last week and now we have a tropical storm with 50 inches of rain. Is that going to cause a problem? Is it going to be on this scale? No. So this scale is only wind speed for hurricanes, and again, I'm glad that Florence was not a 4 when it came ashore, but the category is only wind. So next time you hear somebody say, I'm only going to leave if it's a 3, tell them, well, okay, but that's only part of the pie. That's only talking about wind. What about surge? What about rainfall? What about how big the storm is? What about how slow moving it is? 5 miles per hour, Florence was moving. That's not picked up in this scale. So we want to de-emphasize the category scale. It's part of the pie. If we have a category 5, I'm not going to say, oh, don't worry about the category. Obviously, wind is part of it, but it's only part of the puzzle. Before Florence, we used Arthur and Irene as our examples. So we'll do that again, and then we'll re-emphasize with Florence. So Hurricane Arthur hit in the early 2000s. How many remember Arthur? I think I might have gotten the early 2000 part wrong, but I'll get to the facts more right. Does anybody remember the year? 2014. Thank you, 2014. You can tell I've been here just a couple years. This is important. So Arthur was a Category 2 storm, okay? And no trickery here. It hit around Cape Lookout. And yes, on the Outer Banks, they had some surge issues and winds toward 100 miles per hour. But for most of the area, winds were not too strong until you headed toward down east Carteret County. So for some of us, it was impactful, but for most of us, it was not. Category 2 storm, moving fast, and it was a small storm. Again, Category 2. How many of you remember Irene? Irene was just a 1 when it made landfall. Just a 1. No trickery. It hit around Cape Lookout, general vicinity, but it was a much larger storm. It was a much slower moving storm. So despite it just being a 1, the wind field, since it was a larger storm, was much, much larger. You still had those strong winds across down east Carteret out through the Outer Banks, but notice up toward Greenville and out toward Kenansville, 50 to 70 mile per hour winds. And then, because it was slow moving in a large storm, you had some heavy rainfall, 5 to 10 inches for most of us down our way, but inland 10 to 15 inches of rain. So the Arthur-Irene comparison, Arthur was a 2, Irene was just a 1. Again, just emphasizing that focus on the impacts of the storm, not just the category. So we're going to do that. We're going to practice what we preach, and we're going to start off with one of the biggest impacts, and that would be storm surge. And storm surge, but not only storm surge, but water. This graphic is through 2012, but the statistics are still valid, and we're backed up going back to Florence this past fall. When we're talking about fatalities during a tropical cyclone, tropical storm, hurricane, about 50% are because of storm surge. And when you factor in rain, that accounts for over 80%, around 80% of deaths are water, water, water. What is the thing we talk about most? Category and wind speed. Florence is a 140 mile per hour storm, 110 mile per hour storm. If you put your glasses on and squint or look at the text down here, less than 10% of people die in a hurricane or tropical cyclone from wind. Very unfortunate. Tree down on a car, tree down on a house. It can certainly happen, but it's much more common you're going to lose your life in water, either storm surge or flooding. We did not have any deaths due to storm surge in Florence, but we did unfortunately have some deaths inland with flooding. We'll talk about that coming up. A new product a couple years ago that became official for those that stayed during the storm. You may have gotten this on your phone, storm surge watches and warnings. The Hurricane Center broke out a separate product. This can be issued during a tropical storm because you can have bad surge with even a storm, a tropical storm. Watches and warnings showing life-threatening inundation of more than 3 feet above normally dry ground. How many have heard that and said, what is normally above dry ground? What in the world? Is Weather Service just making up things over there? So to try to explain it, because we had all this different datums, above normally dry ground is a low-lying area adjacent to water, so here, an area that normally is dry, we will have 2, 3, 4, 5 feet of water above that area. And we usually show it in maps like this. Is that a storm surge or is that, so you can look at a closer one during our break at the end. Jen has it in the back. And that is a reasonable worst case scenario. So before Florence, the forecast was 6 to 12 or 9 to 13 feet of storm surge in those areas. And a 1 in 10 chance that in that area we'll see that. So not everybody's going to see that surge, but just a small shift of the storm track will mean it's up the Neuse River, or it's up the Bogue Sound, or it's off the Pamlico Sound, and that's why we kind of go wide with that. So this shows what potentially could happen. This is on our website and it's in the briefing, so you can zoom in and see. It's not to street level, but you get a pretty good idea of the areas that are hot spots. Even though this is a coarse map, this is the end of the Neuse River up toward New Bern, so you get the idea where the hot spots are, and you would see that much better on your computer. So this is from Florence, 8 to 11 feet of surge, over 1,800 water rescues in New Bern. A great job by the officials up in Craven County. Stanley and his folks did a great job. The messaging from us was helpful, but it's also very helpful to have brave men and women going out to rescue people. So that's a big attribute to those folks as well. Down our way, 2 to 4 feet of surge, Swansboro, Bogue Sound. I was Salty Shores by Croatan High School doing some of the surveying. Again, 2 to 3 feet on Highway 24 is impressive when you consider the barrier island of Bogue Banks in between that. Very, very impressive from a scientific perspective. I showed this map just to show you that it can change. And I know some of these numbers are hard to read, but what we're looking at is this is the Neuse River, this is Cherry Point and Havelock, this is New Bern. So these folks up in Riverbend and Trent Woods are farther upstream. They're pretty far from the Neuse River, but that water can funnel on, in that case, a northeast wind, just bottle it up and kind of push it backwards and cause that storm surge flooding even far inland. So just because you're not in Emerald Isle or Atlantic Beach, you look at that map, if you're in a low-lying area by creeks and waterways, you're at risk depending on what the direction is. And look how much it's changed. 6 to 10 feet up in New Bern on the western side of the Neuse River, near Cherry Branch, the ferry, 10 feet. But then over toward Oriental, not right in Oriental, but toward the eastern side of the Neuse River, just a couple of feet. So again, just a slight deviation in storm track will change that, who gets the worst storm surge. And that just shows that. Unfortunately, our deaths during the storm were with flooding, flash flooding, and they were mostly inland, over toward Duplin County. So you have relatives, you have friends. Hurricanes don't impact just the beach, just the coast. These folks were an hour inland. These are all the green is all the flash flood warnings we issued, and you can't see green down here because we issued flash flood emergencies. That'll alert you on your phone. Jen or folks, public officials, if we know it's really, really, really bad, they're doing evacuations, they're doing water rescues, we'll do that to kind of sound the sirens just a little bit louder with that. Some of our rainfall totals, again up toward Winterville and Greenville, it dropped off. Over 30 inches of rain in our area, especially the western part of Carteret County over toward Onslow County. This is a map. Some of the numbers are hard to see, but my point of emphasis with this is Onslow County and Jacksonville, if you've been down there. The center of the storm was down here in New Hanover, Wrightsville Beach, south of Pender. Look at all this rain well away from the center of the storm. The other thing I want you to pay attention to, most of you, show of hands, who's from Carteret County? Who is from Craven County? Anybody from Onslow County? Very good. How about Duplin County or Lenoir or Pitt? All right, so we don't have any far inland folks. However, this could apply to us. Notice the gradient in the rainfall, 20 to 30 inches to just 4 or 5. Just a 50-mile shift of that storm would shift that rainfall. So if we ever get a storm again and it looks like it's going to hit Wilmington and we're on the edge and, Weather Service is only predicting 5 inches of rain for me, but they're forecasting 20 in Jacksonville, know that can shift. Just 50 miles makes a huge difference with that. Here's our state map. Again, tell the folks out towards Charlotte and the western part of the state that the impacts occur just with the center. No, they occur well away from the center of the storm in terms of rainfall. It could be wind, tornadoes, or just about any of the impacts. Our biggest campaign with flooding is Turn Around, Don't Drown. It sounds simplistic. Who would cross a road like that? Most people would not. But let's say you're driving at night. You don't know how deep the water is. You don't know if the road's there. So especially, these are preventable deaths. More than half of water-related deaths in terms of flooding, just a generality in the nation, are in vehicles. It is not from somebody in their home and the water just comes up unexpectedly. They're in their vehicles going around a barricade. They're in their vehicles driving home at night, and they don't know that the water is that deep or the road's not there. So especially as the storm winds down and the wind is diminishing and you're trying to get back from Raleigh and you're trying to get back from Greensboro and you want to check on your home, we all did. Be very, very careful and think back to 80% of deaths are water, water, water. It's not the wind. It's either surge or flooding. So again, a big campaign with that, Turn Around, Don't Drown. Had some extensive river flooding inland, and then the Newport River here across Highway 70. So, we, not super close to our office, but we could see it a couple hundred yards away across our street. We mentioned Hurricane Floyd-like levels in the messaging to, I talked to a lady before, she just moved to the area, so that might not mean a lot to her. But if you were here in the late 90s and you're inland and you have gotten flooding, Floyd means a lot. So the messaging with that was quite strong. Down toward the bottom of the list, wind. Again, not to belittle it, I'm glad it was a Category 1 wind level and not a 4. This is over toward Cape Carteret. Wind speeds and gusts 80 to over 100 miles per hour along the coast itself. That only told half the story. If you were here because of work or you chose to stay, you realize the wind didn't just pick up Thursday evening and afternoon. It was Friday and Friday night and Saturday and even Sunday. It was not as strong, but you still couldn't tarp your roof. You still couldn't do anything because it was still quite windy out. So due to the duration of these winds, trees that were saturated with 20, 25 inches of rain started to lean and became weaker and weaker and weaker. And we had extensive tree damage. And then this house back here is in my neighborhood, extensive water damage. We're at 38 feet. We're on a mountain in Carteret County. But if you don't have a roof and you have 30 inches of rain, you're going to have extensive water damage. So the wind did a number on us, especially the duration. Duration really, really hammered us. Another impact you can have is tornadoes. I call this a slap in the face because you're already preparing for the storm. You're probably not up in New Bern at Target. You're not at the mall. You're already hunkered down. But what tornadoes can produce are isolated areas of stronger damage. So if you do choose to stay, have a way to get a warning on your phone or know whether radio or you're watching your local broadcasters so that you can get into the interior of your home, that you can take extra shelter for those. We heard a lot about tornadoes in neighborhoods. A lot of that was Tornado Florence. When you have 80 to 90 mile per hour winds for a long period of time, you're going to have a lot of damage. And in some cases where we had hundreds and hundreds of trees snapped or uprooted, they were tornadoes. We had over 25 confirmed tornadoes. This is with Florence, but this can occur with tropical storms. We had a couple with Tropical Storm Hermine. So again, don't just focus on, oh, it's just a tropical storm. I'm not going to worry about that. You can get tornadoes. You can get heavy rain. You can certainly get multiple threats even with a tropical storm. The last one that I'll talk about before I turn it over to you is rip currents. And you say, who is swimming before Hurricane Florence? Surfers maybe, they usually know what they're doing. The example with this is more 5 days before Florence. It looks just like it does today. It's gorgeous out. And the waves may not look like this. You might have a big swell, a period, 7, 8 seconds, 9, 10, 12 seconds between waves, but it doesn't look ominous. Or let's say the storm goes over toward Bermuda and we're not even going to be impacted by the storm. And it's 85 degrees and it's a Saturday. We're going to have thousands of people at the beach. The rip current threat can be much higher. So that is something to kind of keep in mind too. And again, maybe not talking of Florence except 5 days in advance. We're talking those storms that miss us and it's a beautiful weekend. Don't let your guard down. A distant storm can certainly produce rip currents. So a couple keys before we turn it over to you. Do not focus on just the category of the storm. Focus on all of the impacts. No two storms are alike. Look at your vulnerability to where you are. Are you near an area that has water issues? Things of that nature. Never drive through flooded roads, and if you choose to stay, have multiple ways to get warnings because those tornadoes can occur. Very, very likely, not just with a landfalling hurricane, but also a tropical cyclone. One quick plug before I turn it over. Carl's going to come up and help me answer some of your questions. Weather Ready Nation is something that we have started. It's an ambassador program all through the Weather Service, not just Morehead City. In the past, somebody like Jen would come to us, or a school teacher would come to us and say, hey, can we have some of those brochures for our school? Can you do a weather presentation? Sure, we would never say no. Weather Ready Nation ambassadors, that is a group that we hook up with local entities to provide you with that weather information. So instead of you coming to us and we're closed arm and you got to see us, we're jumping up and down and say, hey, we can provide a lot of information to you. These are a couple examples. You as an individual can't do it. The local hospital, emergency services, your church, any organization can sign up. I've got brochures with me, or you can go to our website. If you sign up 4 to 8 times a year, you will receive preparedness information throughout the year. So Hurricane Preparedness Week, you get social media graphics, you get things you can put on your employee's website or distribute in a newsletter. There is no commitment, there's no cost. All we ask is disseminate the information. It goes back to the local media helping us with warnings. We can't do this alone. Talk about this forum. The new neighbor that moves down, not to pick on New Jersey or New York or Ohio, the new neighbor that moves down to our area, talk about this type of information. And again, if you do belong to an organization, you can see me at the end and fill out one of these forms. So that is it. That is my email. I also have business cards. If you have to sneak out and you can't stay for the question and answer part, we'll certainly be happy to answer those as well. So at this point, we're going to turn it over to you. I've got the Facebook Live feed up as well. So if you have any questions, I'm joined by Carl Barnes. He joined us from the Charleston, South Carolina office right before Florence. So we were very thankful to have an employee of his magnitude at an office that he was used to doing tropical weather. He helped out tremendously. He leads our tropical program at the office, presentations, preparedness, and training. So at this point, the forum is all you. If you need to cut out, that's okay. Feel free to ask questions. We do have an audience on Facebook Live. So as you ask a question, I'm going to repeat it, and then either Carl or myself will answer it. And again, I really appreciate everybody joining us. Please share this information with others. And I know I could probably count on Eric in the back. So, and again, I'll try to, actually maybe you go around to the person so everybody can hear it, and then I've got it here with the mic.
Yeah, we can do that. So does anyone have any, at this point we're definitely happy to take questions, or just listen to stories, anything that, obviously Florence is still fresh in everyone's mind, so anything that caught you off guard, maybe something you do differently next time?
I was in here for Florence, over the Atlantic Beach, and the Atlantic Beach was as much as like Florence or Jacksonville?
Yeah, great question. So the question was, did Atlantic Beach flood as much as, say, Swansboro or Jacksonville? And the answer is there's no easy answer to that. It's kind of as Eric showed on the one slide, the storm surge is so localized. It has a lot to do with the wind direction, how long the wind lasts. Around here, our sounds are generally so shallow that the water really pushes up on one side quickly because the wind's affecting the top of it. It pushes a lot of water to one side. So it's definitely locally dependent. I know that in Atlantic Beach there were some issues, but it certainly wasn't as bad as it could have been because the wind was blowing kind of out of the east or the northeast for a lot of the storm. It actually was oriented such that it was pushing a lot of the water down the sound. Depending on which side of Atlantic Beach you live on, if you live on the backside right here, then kind of a sustained north wind would be generally worse for you. But no, I believe that Swansboro was probably worse because it was pushing the water down the sound and Swansboro is kind of on that far western side of the sound.
Carl, can you just slide over here a little bit? Yeah.
Absolutely. So, and that is, just because you didn't get storm surge in Florence, we want to stress that doesn't mean you're in the clear. Every storm is unique. So, yes, we could certainly, for Atlantic Beach, since it is south facing, probably the worst case scenario for them would be a storm making landfall just to our west, maybe down Onslow County or closer down to Wilmington, but making landfall and moving northward, almost directly northward, and generally moving faster is going to produce a stronger burst of storm surge right off the bat, and a stronger wind, higher wind speeds would also produce that higher surge. But there's so many variables that come into play. Certainly, anyone who lives close to any kind of waterway is going to need to be alert and understand their vulnerability.
Just a couple questions coming in. Again, we'll repeat back your question. It's for folks in the Facebook audience. And for people watching us on Facebook, please ask questions. For all of you in the audience, if you wanted to see another part, you want to share it with somebody, please do that. You can do that facebook.com/NWS Morehead City. One question that we have that came in via Facebook Live is, I wish I'd seen this sooner. Kim had passed on that comment. This will be on our Facebook page forever, so you can look back at it as well. And then somebody asked about, can we make the slides available? I think that's something we could do maybe on the tropical page, some of them as well. So again, appreciate those comments coming in on the live stream as well. Anybody else out there?
Go ahead and front, yes.
Yeah. Roger Phillips, by the way, with the Carteret Long-Term Recovery Alliance. And I need help understanding. I live in Down East Carteret County. We live in an 8-foot flood zone, and our home is at about 10 foot. Davis is a community that's not too far from my home, and the ground level is about 5 foot, and they had 5 foot of water in their homes in Davis. Help me understand, like, the ground level. I mean, he talked about it a little bit, but it's really very confusing when all of that data is coming in to understand what that storm surge could possibly do to us.
Yeah, that's a great question. Basically, the gist of the question was where you were at. Did you have any storm surge where you were, or did you have any effects where you were actually at, or at 8 feet were you okay?
We were okay. So we had a lot of water from the rain that built up in our ditches, and I think the storm surge was keeping that from going out. And so it backed up a little bit. So we had way more flooding than we've ever had at 8 foot, but not bad.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so just the local complexities of storm surge. The question was referring to two locations that are close to each other would seem that they should have similar vulnerabilities to storm surge, but do get affected differently. Eric did show that one graphic. I don't know if we'll be able to go back and go to it, but we do have those maps that we create that do show in pretty high resolution just the localized storm surge that we're expecting. And even those, wouldn't want to necessarily take it as the letter of the law. Here, both of these bottom two graphics. Kind of what I want to point out about these, though, is just how variable it is. You can see little creeks and waterways can vary by feet in just a matter of a mile or so. So storm surge is definitely, it's fickle, it's very difficult to predict, and I think the big takeaway is that if you are in an area that you know is vulnerable to storm surge, you're really going to want to err on the side of caution because we can put all the science that we have into it. We can use the National Hurricane Center forecast track for the hurricane, but there's always going to be that level of uncertainty. The hurricane could track a little bit one way or the other. And when we were doing surveys, we saw kind of what you were speaking to, where we'd see these small creeks kind of by Newbern, and one side of the creek would get 10 feet, and the water would be at the second floor of people's houses. Just around the corner, literally a block away, they might have 2 or 3 feet just in the bottom part of their home, and that would be it. So it's, it's fairly difficult to predict. We're getting better. We do a pretty good job, but the real key takeaway is understand if you're in a storm surge zone that you really need to err on the side of caution, and if you're told to evacuate, evacuate. Yes, sir.
Pertaining to, a lot of times you hear meteorologists speaking about the right-hand quadrant of the hurricane being the most dangerous. And when Florence was approaching, I'm so used to a majority of the hurricanes will usually come from like south to north or southwest, northeast. So I was so focused in the beginning of Florence, looking at the northeastern quadrant, and then it took a while, and then eventually I started, the storm moving east and west on us. That changes the whole dynamic. So I mean, is it always the case that the right-hand quadrant of the hurricane is always going to be the worst, typically the worst area when it comes to rain and wind impacts?
Great question.
And just repeat it.
Yeah, I can definitely repeat that question. That was a very, obviously, more than probably the normal average person does. So he was asking about, you might commonly hear that people say the right front quadrant is the area of concern for storms around here. Most of the hurricanes that we have are moving from the south to the north generally. So usually that is the northeast side of the storm. Florence was different. Florence came at us from the east, made kind of approached from the west, but it actually was moving southwest by the time it got down to Wilmington and mid-landfall and went further inland. So yes, typically the right front quadrant is going to be the northeast side, but it does depend on the storm motion. Now, the other thing that you mentioned is a really good point, is that always going to be the area of greatest concern in the storm. So the reason, one of several reasons, but primarily the reason we're concerned about that right front quadrant is because if you have a storm that had 60-mile-an-hour winds spinning around, but that storm is also moving north at, say, 30 miles an hour, in that right front quadrant, you're going to get both of those speeds compounded. So it's going to be 90-mile-an-hour winds on the right side of that storm. And on the left side of that storm, it's actually that speed that the storm is moving is going to be subtracted from the wind speed, is generally how it works. There's kind of specifics to it beyond that. But that's why we're concerned about the right front quadrant from a wind speed perspective. Also, that wind speed is going to generate larger storm surge. So we usually see the larger storm surge on the right side of the center of the track of the storm. And additionally, research has shown that that's the most common location for tornadoes to form. Rainfall is probably the one exception that's not always going to be greater on the right side of the storm. There are other things that can factor in. If we have a front that's near us, then that can focus rainfall somewhere other than the right side of the storm. So the rainfall is something where the storm orientation is not necessarily going to correlate to that. So that's one where you want to look at specific forecasts to see the rainfall affected in your location. Thank you.
Most people know get super excited about other people. What do you get excited about weather-wise?
So just repeat it again, the question.
Yeah, so it's a great question. Jim Cantori, obviously, probably the most well-known meteorologist, and he works closely with the Weather Service. He's a really good guy. He really knows his stuff. So he gets excited about thunderstorm once he eclipse. Yeah. I don't think we do that. See, it's a little different for us because we live here in Eastern North Carolina. We are a part of your community. So if anything's coming here, the weather side of us kind of says a little bit of excitement in terms of this is what we train for, we're ready to do this. But also being a part of the community, it's hard to get really excited. I mean, with Florence, once the storm was passed, we all had to worry about our homes too, and we had to go back and we had damage too. But I think most everyone who works at our office would probably say hurricanes are the thing they're most passionate about. And if you live here, it's kind of hard. If you don't like hurricanes, this isn't where you want to be. Well, no one likes hurricanes. You're right. Yeah, I could have said that better, Yes, sir.
The SaffirSimpson Scale is about 40 years old. I think it was developed in 1971. And most of us on the East Coast, we use that as a barometer as to whether or not we evacuate or stay. You know, the science and technology is so far advanced now. Is there any discussion about changing the way that hurricanes are announced and the severity of it that would incorporate things other than wind, that would include surge and would include all the other flooding and all the other factors, so that you could then make a nice, informed decision as to whether or not you should evacuate or stay, other than just with the wind. You know, right now you say this is drop a 2 or a 3, but that's just the wind. How about a new scale that would incorporate all the other elements that are so critical to deciding as to whether or not you should stay or flee?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So he was asking the SaffirSimpson scale, as Eric hit on, it's not perfect. It covers wind, and it basically says nothing toward tornado threat, storm surge threat, flooding rainfall threat. So why haven't we improved it?
Well,
I think we ask that every day. Why can't we do something better than this?
before we get into too much trouble, but all kidding aside, that during the storm itself, the Hurricane Center did elicit a lot of feedback on that. In the government, it takes things a while to change. With that said, there's not a better agency than the Weather Service, Hurricane Center, in terms of always trying to do the best. So fighting through the wheels of change can be difficult, but that's something they're taking a look at. So those voices 100% have been heard, and I would say continue to provide us that feedback, because that's how we can make it. If Carl or I say it, doesn't hold as much weight as you, the tax-paying citizen, Eric, the emergency manager, Jen, the emergency manager, that type of thing. So you're heard. Continue to provide us that feedback, and it is being worked on. We did have a question from a Facebook audience. You mind answering it now, Eric? I'm going to put you on the spot. So we had a question about, we're asked, and this is from the Facebook audience, we're asked to evacuate. The difficult part is to determine in what direction to go. Would you please comment on how to make a good decision regarding evacuation direction?
So that's one of the toughest things to deal with, and I'm an emergency manager as well. And our challenge here down east and down to Onslow counties, we don't have a lot of roads out of here, do we? We don't have a lot of 4-lane highway out of here, do we? So what we encourage you to do is at the beginning of hurricane season, think of several routes you can leave the county on, and then look at the predicted storm path, how many days out, and what kind of rain they're saying will be associated with that. What we learned from Hurricane Florence was typically our hurricanes come up the coast, and they'll come in somewhere between, probably Morehead City up to the Outer Banks, right? So your logical egress would be to the south. You're going to go down 17, or you're going to take 70 over to 40. We didn't get that chance this time. The storm came south, but all the rain, that northeast quadrant, along with the rain bands, pushed it all up into our area. For the first time ever, from Wallace to Wilmington on Interstate 40 was closed and underwater. I would remind you, during Hurricane Matthew, we were all surprised that there were 639 roads closed in the eastern part of the state. With Hurricane Florence, it was over 1,400 roads closed in the state of North Carolina. So you have to think when you're going to evacuate, you have to give yourself enough lead time. So I encourage you at the beginning of hurricane season, never let your car go below half a tank of gas. My wife personally puts money in an envelope in a drawer somewhere in the house that none of us guys know where it is. And when hurricane season comes, she has cash, because when the electricity goes out, what doesn't work? We are a debit card world, are we not? But if you've got cash, you can get out. If you've got youngins or you've got grandkids, you need to think about, do you have enough diapers and formula? I will take you back to, let's see, remember when I-40 went all the same direction? What was that? Hurricane Floyd. People were going to leave, right? I can tell you personally, people in Onslow County that waited till the last minute to leave and were trying to head up I-40 to get out of town, spent 13 hours to go from Jacksonville, North Carolina to Raleigh. 13 hours. They ran out of gas, they ran out of diapers, they ran out of formula, they ran out of patients. So you have to leave early enough if evacuation is your plan. If not, shelter in place, be prepared. Make sure you have the things you need to get through. We used to tell everybody what? 3 days of water, right? So I'm going to ask you all. Hurricane Florence, how many days were you without power? 10, 7, 9. How much water did you really need? Because wastewater and water treatment plants have to shut down temporarily when you get all this rain and water, because they don't want you drinking bad stuff. And let's face it, it's no fun when the poop stops going away. It's not a good party at the house, right? So I'm going to tell you, you need 7 days now. That's what we tell people. That's what we tell the emergency managers from down in Onslow County. In that area, we say you need 7 days. The first 72 are on you because it may take that long before emergency personnel can start to come do rescues. But if you're going to talk evacuation, plan several routes. Go far enough inland so you're away from the effects. And then, so here I am, an emergency manager. I sent my wife away. First, she went towards Charlotte, stayed with friends for a day and a half, and then went down to her sisters in Charleston. Florence is gone. My phone's ringing off the hook on about day 7. I want to come home. Well, you can't get here from there. 2 days later, you need to find me a route to come home. I'm sorry you can't get there from here. Well, I'm going to come up and go through Georgetown on 17. I said, that'll be great. That's as far as you'll go. The PD River's flooding now because the storm turned and went back north, didn't it? So then we had additional residual flooding. When you leave, be prepared that you might not get back for 2 weeks. Make sure you've got clothes, you've got money. Make sure you've got your medicines. That's the big thing. Hurricane season, shame on you if you don't have like up to 90 days if you can get it in advance. And I know there are struggles and challenges with all of this, but those are things we are going to have to think about because this may become something like a new normal.
How many of y'all stayed? How many of those that raised their hand and stayed got damaged? To where you had to gut your house? Okay, good. But here's the thing I want you, what Eric was talking about. How many of you, when you prepare, put your vital records in one spot where they are safe and they're dry and you can get to them at any point in time? It's going to sound crazy. How many of you have a dishwasher in your house? What does that dishwasher keep from leaking on your floor? So what do you think you can put in that dishwasher if you know you're going to get damaged? You can put those vital records in there. Another way to do this, how many of you have Facebook or you have an email address, Google, whatever? You can literally scan your records in and store them electronically. That way, if they do become damaged, you've got an electronic record of it. And if, goodness gracious, your home gets damaged beyond repair, or you evacuate and can't get back, you can go to a library, you can go to somebody's home and bring those records up if you store them in the right place. So you have access to them. Sometimes you have to think outside the box to protect yourself. Now I'm going to back up for a minute.
Before you back up, who are you and where are you from?
My name's Gary Neal. I'm the Eastern Regional Emergency Manager for the Marine Corps. So I have everything from Cherry Point all the way around to New Orleans. So this is big for me come hurricane season because I've got all those Marine Corps bases, the families, and the Marine Corps members that I have to worry about. And I work very closely with Jim and with the National Weather Service. I live here. I live in Onslow County. So, going back to Matthew, I tried to get somebody I know to evacuate with her mom. It's a good thing we did. They chose not to. But they never would have gotten back in time. They would have been stuck. So I'm going to back up a little bit. Your question about above ground level. I would beseech, beg, and plead each and every one of you. Go to your county GIS online. Look at the plats that they have that show your elevation, and then compare that to this storm surge map. That will tell you. That's one of the things when I first bought my house down in Holly Ridge. I'm from Holly Ridge. First thing I looked at was 500-year floodplain and the high storm surge. 20 feet above 500-year floodplain and 6 feet above the high storm surge. I didn't have to keep looking because of that. These are things that you have to look at. If you haven't looked at it, go look at it.
I have a question.
Yes.
This is straightforward, and I appreciate that you all are here, but what about the aftermath of the hurricane? A lot of people cannot evacuate because they don't have the money or the means to evacuate. Some of us have businesses here. We have animals, so we decided to stay. I've lived here for 26 years. I stayed during all the hurricanes. We own the Bistro by the Sea restaurant. We started cooking because we knew people needed food. It was going to go to waste. There was no way to communicate with people to coordinate our efforts. We were just cooking, and thank God we were on Highway 70. Took food down to the United Methodist Church. 200 people were waiting here for the Red Cross for 3 hours. We just happened to know that people were down there. We just took food because we didn't know what else to do without even really having any kind of communication. We had the NOAA radio during the hurricane, and that was great. Can that radio be used after the hurricane passes so that people that are here have some type of communication? We have a ham radio club in Carteret County that we could have used. We need this type of information and training because we don't have internet, and we're so used to picking up our cell phones. Some of us don't have landlines, so we have to have a plan after to help us all.
So just to summarize for those watching on Facebook Live, the question was after the hurricane, obviously after Florence, a lot of communications went down. How can we improve just our communication after the hurricane, and how can we immediately start with the recovery process?
So I'm going to address the evacuation piece.
And Stephen, say who you are.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm
That's
Stephen
right.
Ray. I'm the Emergency Services Director for Carteret County. Evacuation, there's a lot of misconceptions about evacuation. Some of them is that people don't have the money to evacuate. They don't have the means to evacuate. Carteret County provided transportation for people to evacuate. We provided an inland center for you to go to, so it wouldn't cost you any money. Those places have food, water, and the necessities for you. When we talk about afterwards, and when we talk about communication then, we do the best we can to communicate during that time. We have ham radio. We use ham radio the whole time
And we would
during
not
the
know that
storm.
information. We had no clue.
We also sent out brochures to the Down East area that was cut off from us. We also sent it to the western part of our county. So we communicate the best we can. We understand you don't have internet. We understand that Facebook Live is probably taken away from you at that time. But we still try to get it out to you guys in the best means possible as far as brochures, as far as our news, media affiliates, and those methods. I hear what you're saying.
Yes.
I understand. But then we would need suggestions of what better way can we communicate to you guys.
That's why we're here. We need to have, I think, people set up with ham radios because I think that's the only way to communicate. Perhaps the person from the Marines. I called my godson. He was his first general in the Marines, his one-star general, and I said, how can we communicate? What do we need to do? You go to other countries, we set up communications all the time and help people in disasters. What can we do in Carteret County? And his suggestion was, well, it's very expensive. You've got the communication balloon, so you can use your cell phones, you can do things like that. But that's millions of dollars. So I just want to know that if we have people set up in the community that know how to use the ham radios or CBs or something, that they can have districts, they can get the word out, and then so we can help each other. We all want to help each other.
I hear what you're saying, but I can ask this group how many people have ham radio.
That's right.
How many people use ham radio?
I would love to.
We rely heavily on the ham radio folks, just in case our communications do go down here in the county, and we're able to
911 call that we need. These guys did a fabulous job
Yeah.
there at Florence because they set up a patch for us just in case. We didn't lose any 911 services, but just in case we did, they patched us through to
I think
Iredell
it's
County to
wonderful.
get that back.
We have a club here in Carteret County, I researched it, that meets every month. And I want to go and I want to learn how to become a ham radio operator.
I encourage you to do that.
Exactly,
I
we need to
everybody
encourage
else to do
all,
that.
yes.
But,
But we need to get the word out that we have a ham radio club in Carteret County. Can you help us with that? Yes, I would love to.
So at this point, maybe pass it off to this lady asked a little bit about amateur radio. For those that are watching from home on the live stream or are watching now, one good source of information, ma'am, that I was, as long as you had power or battery operated radio, just regular AM, FM, that a lot of the local news stations did a really good job, putting that information out. So that's one way, making sure you have battery operated radio. We're talking traditional radio. And then we're joined by John. John, introduce yourself for the audience and talk a little bit more. Like this lady, wants to become involved, maybe get a ham radio so that she can communicate, kind of taking it upon herself. Talk a little bit about to the audience here and on Facebook how folks can just find out a little bit of information from you.
Hi, good evening, Eric. Thank you. My name is John Hopkins. I'm KJ4EH. I'm the Newport Sky 101 coordinator. I happen to run the amateur radio emergency service at Carteret County and 15 other counties in eastern North Carolina. So we take care of weather, but also directly answer your question. The Carteret County Amateur Radio Club meets usually the last Saturday of the month. Lately, they've been doing it at Cox's Restaurant here in Warren City. So they meet at about 8:30. If you're interested, please let me have your name and I'll get in touch and I'll turn your information over to the club. So during our operation, we like Steve said here, we were at the Newport Middle School. My wife and I both operated between the Newport Sky 1 and also the Carteret County Amateur Radio Emergency Service. So we were there for 4 days. So we took some traffic, and also in the event of another event like this, you can always find a ham radio operator and they can send out messages. If you have to get hold of the family members or anybody, we can get you nationwide. So send it off to another ham and they'll relay a message to you. So there's a lot of things. I think it would be very interesting to go to the meeting. And another big thing is coming up will be our annual, Field Day. It's an emergency communications day where we operate on the emergency situations. This year it'll be June 22nd and June 23rd. And I believe the Carteret County is going to be holding it at the Newport, the park where they hold the pig festival over there, right on Howard Boulevard. So it'll be kicking off starting about 2 p.m. on Saturday, the 22nd. It'll be running to 2 p.m. on the 23rd. There'll be people there to show you about amateur radio and you're interested in getting licensed. So it's not a hard process. Technician license, 35 questions. You have to get 27 right. So that's easy enough to do. There's no Morse code on it. It's just some theory and some rules and regulations. And hopefully, I'll see you at the test session. I'm a volunteer examiner, so I can license you. Thank you, Eric.
I'm going to pass it back to Stephen here. I know some folks are having to head out. We're going to head it over to Stephen here in a second. Before you leave, this is not a 1 day, 1 hour thing. Ma'am, I really appreciate the question, this good feedback and things like that. For those that are watching at home, weather.gov/MHX. Carl's done a great job putting up a lot of information for Hurricane Preparedness Week. So all the stuff we're talking about, a lot of those answers are there. And for those that are here, please head over to the table, grab brochures on hurricane information and where you can get that information on our website. So please grab that before you leave. Stephen?
So to give you one of our initiatives out of our office that ham radio came to us with, we're getting ready to put ham radios into 3 of the fire departments in the community. One's going to go down in the western part of the community. One's going to be centralized here in Morehead City, and then we're going to do one down east. That way we have ham radio operators in those fire departments that can, one, help us with our 911 services, but also help possibly get out better information. So that's an initiative that was started a couple of months ago between us and the ham radio folks, and we're hoping that once those get up and running, that we can do it to more of the fire departments within our county. Yes, any time after a storm, you could always go to a fire department and get information, because we push that information out to the fire department. Right. But we also realize in our office that our fire departments are the keys inside the communities, and that's why we push that information to our fire departments. As you know, most of the fire departments in this area started as volunteer agencies. Most of the people that actually work at those places have been there for many years and are very embedded into the community. And so that's why we push information to them in order to facilitate outreach.
I think we've got one over here, Carl.
I just wanted to point out that the fire stations throughout the county are the emergency operations center for all the municipalities. We're not only there to answer questions, we're the communications nodes to all of these folks. So you should go there. And that's where you're going to find out what you need to find out.
I'll follow up. Also say this, and I'm going to plug for Steve and his folks. They do everything possible for the county that they possibly can. There's only so many of them, and there's a whole lot more of y'all. But it takes a community. It's called community resilience. And it's the questions like yours and the involvement that you want to put forth. And that's the reason why y'all came tonight, because you want to be involved to some degree. I don't think Jen or Steve or any other emergency manager will turn down free help as long as it's within reason. You know, it takes community to be resilient, and that's what emergency management is all about. And we can't do our job without your help and without the help from the National Weather Service. They play a very integral part into what we do every year during hurricane season. I can't stress that enough. And they're making part of that available to you now, to the public, to the community. So it betters your information to make good decisions that would help the emergency management agencies in all these counties take kind of a sigh of relief and go, our folks are taking care of themselves, where do we need to put our priorities in? And that's for the folks that can't leave, the folks that can't recover real quick, that need food, things of that nature. So I'll be the first one to tell you, I am so tickled to see y'all here tonight. And I get to say that, I will get to say this again later on this month in another meeting such as this. But I can't stress it enough. It is community involvement that gets the job done. Every emergency starts locally. Your house, your neighborhood, your county, your state. And that's how we approach.
We just need a plan so we're not in people's way. You know, we want to be told a plan so we can help. That's why we're all here, like you said.
How about a shelter that's open? They got $50 million in their clout, and they haven't built a shelter yet. They got the money.
All right, at this point, we don't see too many more questions on Facebook. Are there any other lingering questions out there? We've got one over here. And again, for those that are just tuning in on Facebook Live, you couldn't come out to this today. You can watch this stream in playback mode forever on our page, facebook.com/NWS Morehead City.
Could you take us through the decision-making? Could you take us through the decision-making process of when you, like, how the county decides to evacuate versus like not evacuate, and why one county would say let's evacuate 2 days at a time and another county says 3 days at a time?
Okay. So the question was, what is the decision tree on evacuations with the county? I know, and this gentleman mentioned it varies by county. So, Stephen, this storm, what was the decision tree on evacuations?
So our decision tree goes to We look at what the National Weather Service is giving us, what the National Hurricane Service is telling us as well. And we look at a lot of storm surge and flooding inundation and what's going to happen with that. Then what we do is we get with the municipalities, and we have what we call a control group, and it's all of the elected officials from each municipality here in the county, along with our chair of our county commissioner, and then we have their representative also of their emergency management department. We come together, we give them all of the information that we have gathered from the National Weather Service and from the Hurricane Center, and then we collectively make a decision. Sometimes the decision is to do a whole county evacuation as we do this time. Sometimes it's to evacuate down east and low down zone. But that decision is on the control group. We just relay the information that we know about the storm and the inundation that we're looking at, and any hazard that we're looking at during that time. Does that answer what you
And we'll, okay, yeah, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
I don't know if there's anybody here to answer this particular question, but as you all know, there are many people still out of their homes because the repairs have not been done. I personally have friends and family that have been taken by slipshod outfits that descended upon the county. And I was wondering if there's any other group meeting to maybe get a plan where these people have to register with the county. They have to post a bond. They have to be responsible for the work they're doing. Do you know, or will anyone know whether that's happening?
So I know for all rebuilding, there has to be a permit drawn, and those permits are done through our planning department with the county. And they vet those requests at that time. What their process is, I will have to tell you that. I would like to give you a better answer. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I was from North Carolina, and we're doing exactly that.
We're actually supposed to be a crisis counseling thing and job, but nobody cares about mental health when the rain is falling on their heads and the roll back clouding up their lungs, right? So we're partnering with community resources, faith-based groups, nonprofits, and they're putting up roofs. They're getting rid of mold. They're passing out furniture, all kinds of stuff. We've got brochures up at the emergency table. Feel free to pick that up. You can come and see me. I can give you my direct number. Whatever we can do to help, give it to your friends. That's exactly what we do. We work with legal aid to go after those shady people. Okay? Thank you. You're welcome.
Thank you.
Try to find either referrals or whether it's realtor or
So we're going to wrap things up.
We're going to wrap it up. We really appreciate everyone who was able to come today. If you have any additional questions, please feel free to talk to me and Eric. Like you said, weather.gov/MHX is our website. Also follow us on social media. Thank you very much.